Pete Golding got the Ole Miss secret weapon they were looking for in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Locked On Ole Miss podcast is the most watched Ole Miss podcast, bringing you the best Ole Miss coverage every single day. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we break down Ole Miss's secret weapon, Andrew Jones. The Rebels landed this highly sought-after linebacker from the transfer portal. What makes him such a key piece for the defense? We'll discuss what he needs to do to make an impact and what Ole Miss needs to do to unlock his full potential. Plus, in recruiting, top target Deuce Geralds is setting up his official visits, and this is a great sign that the Rebels are staying on his radar. And tonight, the Rebels hit the road to take on South Carolina. We'll preview the matchup and what's at stake for Ole Miss in this crucial SEC showdown. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. A special shout out to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And for your second listen, check out Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy for more college football and SEC insights. So Ole Miss got the guy that they were kind of really going for in the transfer portal. And the reason I know that is after Andrew Jones committed to South Carolina, Ole Miss didn't quit. Ole Miss still worked to get him to campus. Ole Miss still worked to give him a good offer and got him locked up. Andrew Jones is a very key piece of this. And it's really interesting to see how Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding and those guys attack the transfer portal. It's with an attitude that they can do anything. It's filled with possibilities in the transfer portal, which is kind of funny to me because it's the opposite of the fan base, the members of the fan base that talk about curses and the We Are Ole Miss fan base members, and talking about that, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that you always blame every time you don't hit what you want. I think that's interesting. That's something that I just don't understand personally. Those curses, those things, not being able to shoot for the stars and not wanting to because of some imagined reason that comes up. You're going to fail more times than not. If you want to look at a baseball analogy, that is it. You know, the best Hall of Fame hitters fail 70% of the time. Me personally, I had it set up to where, hey, I want to get outside of my comfort zone every single year. I would find something to set up that would put me outside of my comfort zone. And whether it was being in a movie, which I was in Country Strong, so try and find me on Country Strong, or I wanted to get into a fist fight, one time legally get into a fist fight. So I took karate and learned that as well. It's just the way that I'm wired. And it's the way that Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding are wired. I think that I can do absolutely anything. I think if I wanted to be the president of the United States and seriously set the goal of being the president of the United States, by the time I'm 70 years old, I would be the president of the United States. That is just the way my mind works. Other people, their mind doesn't work that way. I mean, years of experience and what's going on, there's learned behaviors that happen. Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding are more like me than more like them. Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding think they can do absolutely anything in recruiting and get whatever they want. Lane Kiffin thinks that he can win a national championship at Ole Miss, and he's working towards that happen. It's the same type mindset that I have, he has, Pete Golding has, and they're all pulling the rope in the same direction. So when a player like Andrew Jones, who is very highly sought after in the transfer portal, hits the portal, everybody's ears perks up in that building, and Lane Kiffin decides he's going to get him, and by goodness, he's going to get him. Andrew Jones is a linebacker out of Grambling, 6'2", 220 pounds, a super athletic guy. He is nothing but upside. He is somebody that is a lottery ticket for Ole Miss. And the fact that Ole Miss's staff thought this much of the player, including the defensive coordinator, who is his position coach, went after Andrew Jones tells a whole bunch. This is a more athletic type linebacker. More athletic linebacker probably they've had since Patrick Willis was the last one that was this athletic. He can go sideline to sideline with anybody. Super athletic guy for Ole Miss coming up in spring. But this is a lottery ticket that actually depends on some other players. Like, for instance, the defensive line has to be good. The defensive line has to be really good to unlock this secret weapon for Ole Miss. For somebody to go sideline to sideline, you need to be able to keep offensive linemen off the linebackers. Andrew Jones, if he has a clean linebacker space, has a chance to do a lot of work. And, you know, if he can't develop, if it doesn't happen, if the defensive line isn't quite there, Ole Miss also brought in Taj Boyd, the linebacker out of Missouri State, another athletic guy, another guy that they need to develop. A lot of the similar things that Andrew Jones needs to go through, he needs to go through as well. But you can see how Pete Golding kind of attacked this situation with numbers. And finally, Jaden Yates was brought in as well. He was a Field Steel All-American linebacker. He's 6'1", 215. He's somebody that doesn't need as much development. He is somebody that, if all else fails, break glass, he's that guy. He's the 100-yard landlord. He has a chance to be a really good linebacker and compete potentially with TJ Daugherty. But everybody needs to remember also that most of these guys only have 1 year. Jaden Yates has multiple years. So you can see Jaden Yates as TJ Daugherty in 2026 at linebacker as well. But that kind of got me off topic a little bit. Andrew Jones, is terrific. Ole Miss has built their linebacker room in a way that they can take advantage of these super athlete type players, these Chris Paul type players that can do a lot of work, either blitzing A gaps or going sideline to sideline. These athletic guys have a chance to be really special. And if the defensive line is good enough to keep the offensive linemen off the linebackers to where that athleticism can be a plus, you end up with a season like Chris Paul. Chris Paul is a really good linebacker. Now, don't get me wrong. He is really terrific at what he does. But what made Chris Paul so special was the defensive line was able to keep offensive linemen off of him and allowed him to go sideline to sideline, allowed him to just purely attack from the second level. And that is the reason he was so good. And Suntarine Perkins was so good. And TJ Daugherty with that safety touchdown sack against Arkansas. The linebackers were so good a year ago because the defensive line was so good. So this defensive line unit, they think has a chance to be good. That's the reason they went out and got an Andrew Jones to be this secret weapon type player. They think the defensive line is going to be pretty good, but they also have options in their tool chest if that defensive line isn't quite what they thought it would be. They've got redundancies built into the system to where this defense has a chance to be solid one way or another. It's not going to be a situation to where if Andrew Jones, for whatever reason, doesn't turn out in the fall, you have a situation to where you have other players that can fit in and they have the ability to play different ways. Redundancies in the systems are big, but the fact that they even went after an Andrew Jones means that they think this defensive line can be pretty good, and somebody like Andrew Jones can be an absolute secret weapon for the Ole Miss Rebels. It's going to be really interesting to see. I want to see Taj Chambers. I want to see Jaden Yates as well, but mixing them up with TJ Daugherty, Ole Miss has a nice two deep to work with at linebacker. And, they had players there to begin with. Raymond Collins, the JUCO guy out of Jones County Junior College, he's going to have a chance to turn up this spring as well. We did a couple of shows back about whether or not Ole Miss needs a tougher spring practice. And Ole Miss has the players team, and you heard all the players talk about how wonderful it is to play at Ole Miss. But the other side of the coin is in the middle of August, they were talking about we still need to try and find our best 5 players on the offensive line. And Ole Miss had his trouble with the offensive line over the course of the whole year. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition to where it might need to become a little bit less of a players-led team and a little bit more of a coaches-led team to try and find the best 22 on the field. That's just my opinion. But Andrew Jones is a guy that, in the first game against Furman, Chris Paul didn't even start. It's because you didn't know what the defensive line was going to be like in an actual game situation and allow him to free flow. I think Andrew Jones has a chance to be the Chris Paul of this defense if the defensive line of Xavier Harris, Will Eccles, Jam Brown, whoever plays the three technique, Cam Franklin, Deshaun Womack, those guys, if you can keep players off the linebacker, you have a chance to be really, really good. And we'll see exactly how it goes for Ole Miss. You know, Deuce Geralds is saying all of the right things if you're an Ole Miss fan. But what is the next step for this prospect? We break down his path to the Rebels potentially coming up next. You know, after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether I'm tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give a space a new look to start the year, Wayfair had everything that I needed and all within my budget. And they can do that for you too. I'm currently looking for furniture for my recovery. And I bought a recliner recently and maybe some other furniture that I can get for my surgery recovery. It's easy to find pieces that fit my style and budget at Wayfair. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items. Their site is so easy to navigate at Wayfair. I found everything I needed in no time. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every space. You know, what did I want? It was the question that I looked for whenever I was buying stuff. You know, I'm doing the surgery recovery in April. I need to prepare ahead of time and I need to get set up. So I was looking for a recliner. What's my score style? It's like, well, I'm going to be in that recliner a lot. I want a cloth recliner and all of those things. And Wayfair made it super easy to handle. You know, Wayfair made it quickly done and delivery was free and hassle-free. So give your home a refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WARFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. So Ole Miss is on the tip of the tongue of Deuce Geralds. Deuce Geralds is a defensive line prospect out of Georgia in the class of 2026. He announced that he will make his official visit soon after he does his college spring visits. And Deuce Geralds is a guy that I talked to at the Under Armour All-American game. Really, really nice kid. And I also made a joke the last time I talked about him on this show that I was at Ole Miss, I think, when his dad was at Ole Miss. So whenever Deuce Geralds being recruited for college and his dad was on the team when I was there, that officially makes me feel really old. But Deuce Geralds is a really, really good prospect. Really good. I was at the Under Armour All-American game where I talked to Deuce, and he mentioned that everybody was, well, he didn't mention they were negative recruiting, but they obviously are because the idea was in his head. But he talked about Ole Miss needing to play high school players in recruiting. And that means that other schools are likely putting that in his ear of what's going on. And I am at a little bit of relief, and they don't genuinely know the roster because Suntarine Perkins, Xavier Harris, Will Eccles, there's going to be a lot of high school players that play on the defensive line. So that bug that other teams are putting in Deuce's ear might have a chance to be a positive by the time this is all said and done. Another thing that I saw in the Under Armour All-American game, I talked with Brian Smith. You saw him on here, The Portal. He does that on the Locked On Network. He also comes on this podcast quite a bit, and he's going to be the fill-in host while I'm recovering from my surgery a little bit later on this spring. He talked about this. It's like, hey, Deuce Geralds is the type of guy that wins MVPs in these type of events. And I was like, okay. And he said, look at him. If he was 3 inches taller, he'd be the number one player in the country. But as he sits, he's listed at 6'1", 255 pounds. And they worry that at that size and weight, if he can play three technique. I think that is what he projects as the next level, is somebody that could grow into a three technique or play a strong side defensive end, really similar to what Jared Ivey did at Ole Miss. Deuce Geralds can do something very similar to that, and his versatility is going to allow him to be moved around in a similar way to Suntarine Perkins. So I was sitting here looking at that and talking to Brian. It's like, okay, so what do you need to see? And he's like, hey, whenever they run a power play and you have a guard coming around to basically block that three technique, I want to see he can stand up to what's going on. I think that Deuce Geralds is going to weigh 280 pounds pretty quickly once he gets to college. I think Jared Ivey is an excellent comp for how he is going to grow other than the height. His being 6'1" is he's always going to be 6'1". Well, he's listed as 6'1", but I digress. He is somebody that has a chance to be really good, and he has been to USC. He has been to Ohio State. He has been to several programs around the country. And he wants to visit those schools before deciding which of the 4 or 5 schools that he wants to official visit. Now, Ole Miss is going to be in the game with Deuce Geralds. They just are. You can tell by talking to Deuce that Ole Miss is in the game. He's somebody that lights up a little bit when he talks about Ole Miss. He grew up coming to Ole Miss game with his dad, Steven Geralds, who was Jevin Snead's center at Ole Miss. So you can see the road for Ole Miss landing potentially this prospect. And we will see exactly how he handles it. I want to see what Ole Miss is going to do with it. Steven Geralds said that he met with Randall Joyner and Pete Golding whenever he came for Junior Day. He's still talking about Junior Day. Junior Day was 2 weeks ago. He's still talking about it, which means that Ole Miss did a good job on Junior Day. But how exactly did Pete Golding show that he planned on using Steven Geralds? Did he break out some of the Will Anderson stuff? Or is it more of the strong side defensive end stuff that was brought out? Is he doing some 3 technique stuff? Did he show Walter Nolan on the film? I'm curious to see exactly what Ole Miss told Deuce Geralds. Again, Deuce Geralds is likely the number 1 player on Ole Miss's board. He is absolutely huge, and Ole Miss has visited him probably 6 times already this year. And he has come to Junior Day. He's likely going to take an official visit to Ole Miss if everything's there. Ole Miss has as good a chance of landing this player as anybody. At the end of the day, it's probably going to come down to NIL and who is the most committed to landing a player like Deuce Geralds. That's probably for people that just want any type of information to look at. This is what's going to stand out for Ole Miss. We'll see. All I know is when I talked to Deuce Geralds at the Under Armour game, he kind of lit up just a little bit when he started talking about Ole Miss. And he said, and what would it take for him to commit to Ole Miss? Answered the question. He immediately answered, I need to see high school players playing on the defensive line, which likely means other schools are putting that in his head that Ole Miss is very transfer portal dominant. And that is something that's gotten through there. Luckily, like I said in this segment, Ole Miss Will Eccles, Ole Miss Jam Brown, Ole Miss Xavion Harris, Suntaryn Perkins. There's a lot of Mississippi high school players that are set to play on the defensive side of the ball for Ole Miss. So it could be a very, very good thing for the Rebels as it goes. Anyway, Ole Miss takes on South Carolina tonight, but what's at stake for the Rebels? In our final segment, we break down what this game means for the season and preview what could possibly happen. Stay tuned. All right, Ole Miss takes on South Carolina tonight, and Ole Miss traditionally does not play well at the Colonial Life Center. And it's also very important to realize that South Carolina at home and South Carolina on the road is a completely different animal. Both of those situations are completely different. And when you look at teams that are getting ready to go into South Carolina, they got beat by Auburn by 5 points, by Alabama by about 5 points. I think they lost to Florida by 1 point. Those are all top 5 teams that have traveled into Columbia, South Carolina, and barely escaped with their life. South Carolina is winless in the SEC. I don't know particularly how they are, but they are winless in the SEC. But that doesn't mean they have not played well this year. And they put the fear of God into several teams this year. I think Mississippi State won the game in overtime in the Colonial Life Center. That is a difficult out for everybody involved. Ole Miss is going to have to pack a lunch to handle South Carolina. And the keys to this game is pretty simple. We talked about South Carolina nearly beating Auburn, Alabama, and Florida and Columbia. But Ole Miss has to be careful. This is a scheduled tweet, basically. Be competitive on the boards versus South Carolina. When Ole Miss is, they win the game. When Ole Miss is not, they lose the game. That is the secret sauce. If Ole Miss can rebound the basketball, they are likely going to win the game. And the third thing is handle the defensive pressure from South Carolina and do not allow easy points from the Gamecocks. Ole Miss does not turn over the ball very often. South Carolina is very defensive pressure oriented. Ole Miss needs to have a good game taking care of the basketball. If they do that, they should be eliminating easy points for the South Carolina Gamecocks. And when you take away the easy gimmies for South Carolina, it's going to be difficult for them to score. Now, South Carolina has an NBA level player on their team. They have a really good player. But as a team, they don't quite have it. Our players to watch, it's their players to watch each and every game, it seems like. Sean Padula running the point guard. We talked about how Ole Miss needs to take care of the basketball. If they can do that, they're going to be in much better shape. Dre Davis, when Dre Davis scores, Ole Miss wins. When Dre Davis doesn't score, it can get iffy. I'll put it to you like this. He's had 3 good games in the last 4, Texas, Kentucky, and LSU. His one bad game in those 4 was against Auburn. Ole Miss is 3-1 in those 4 games with the only loss at Auburn. Dre Davis playing well is going to be instrumental to Ole Miss as a basketball team in Columbia. And third of all is Matthew Morrell. If Matthew Morrell is hitting shots, Ole Miss is difficult to beat. Ask Kentucky. Matthew Morrell is somebody that can really turn it on, and he has looked more like himself over the last couple of games. Now, Matthew Morrell, he is basically getting the responsibility right now of guarding the best player on the other team. And he's doing a pretty good job of that. I think it was Kim Coleman or something like that at LSU. Their big scorer that's averaging 17 a game. I forgot his name. Brain tumor moment. I'm sorry about that. He's kind of shut him down. He did the work. He did what he needed to do. And Matthew Morrell, I did not have him becoming this team's super defensive specialist, but here we are. He's somebody that has a chance to have a very long NBA career as a D3 type basketball player for Ole Miss. This game is huge for the Ole Miss Rebels. We did a show yesterday about how Ole Miss was a lock potentially for the NCAA tournament, and I believe they are. I believe Ole Miss is in the tournament no matter what. I mean, the only way they're not is if they lost 7 straight ball games and the first round of the SEC tournament. So that's 8 games in a row. Maybe then Ole Miss would not be in the tournament, but likely Ole Miss is going to win 1 or 2 more, which means they should be securely in. So if you're just looking at probability, Ole Miss probably has like a 99% percentage of making the NCAA basketball tournament. This game and every game from this point on, if you believe that, is for seeding, which is actually more important than actually making the tournament. Now, somebody like Oklahoma, somebody like Vanderbilt, somebody like Arkansas, they're paying attention to making it into the tournament. They just want the playing game. They want everything in front of them. Ole Miss is playing for seeding. And Ole Miss right now is teetering somewhere in between a 4 seed and a 5 seed. And this game, if Ole Miss wins, this is a game they should win, but this is a quad 2 game. They're outside of the top 75. Even though it's on the road, it will be a quad 2 game. Ole Miss does not have a quad 2, 3, or 4 loss this season. It's important for Ole Miss to move up the stat line, the tournament resume line, the seed line to win games like this. This is the last easy game and the last non-tournament team on Ole Miss's basketball schedule this year, potentially. So Ole Miss needs to win this game to avoid any blemish on the quad 2 level, because right now Ole Miss is undefeated in 2, 3, and 4 quadrants. They've only had quad one losses to this point. So this game is important to win because winning it makes it to where you can keep that to where the rest of your schedule is likely going to be quad one, and you can start working up seed lines. The school record for a seed is a 3 seed. That was in 2001. That was the Sweet 16 year. And the school record for number of wins is 27. Both is on the table for this Ole Miss team, but it needs to win against South Carolina. And this game, I think, is going to be a little bit of a rock fight. I do. I think this game has a chance to be very ugly with the way both teams play defense. It is going to be imperative on Ole Miss to get turnovers and to turn over South Carolina. And if you can do that, you might be able to inch a little bit farther. South Carolina has played Alabama, Auburn, and Florida to within 5 points at home. I think they're going to do that again. I think Ole Miss is going to win 64-59 in this game. 64-59. Ole Miss wins, moves to 8-4 through 12 games in the SEC with 6 left to go against Vanderbilt and Mississippi State coming up in the next 2. Remember, this is the biggest 4-game stretch for seeding in of the season for Ole Miss. They need this game against South Carolina. They need the Mississippi State game, and they need the Vanderbilt game to get to 10-4. And then you have like the last 4 games of Tennessee, Florida, Auburn, and Oklahoma. That's going to be a difficult close to the season, but you have a chance where everything is in front of you if you pick off 2 wins in those games as well. We'll see exactly how it goes. This basketball team, we've seen they can beat absolutely anybody and can look absolutely fantastic. They can also kind of look 9-seedish, 10-seedish. If that happens, they could be in trouble. But this is a game that is normally, it has been a trap type game for Ole Miss basketball. If Ole Miss can avoid that trap this season and win the game against South Carolina, they'll be off and running. Again, 8-4 is on the table for Ole Miss. 8-4 with Mississippi State coming into your place with a chance to really stretch your legs in this NCAA tournament seeding race. So we'll see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number 1 Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Hotty toddy, everyone. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.